nothing to do with the
have
fruitless
nothing
deeds
to
of
do with the
darkness,
fruitless
but
deeds of
rather
darkness,
expose them.
but rather expose them. Have nothing to do with the
Have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather
Some
expose
of them still haven't been told about. Tinfoil hat they're wearing on their nose and mouth. Autonomy and economy, they close it down. Notice how they let us know what they won't allow. Only sometimes ignore the lies and the double think. Pay no mind to the puppet strings, cause once you've seen it you can't unsee it. Just speaking for us heathens that love freedom. One reason my gun's clean and I read books. Take a deep look into history, they don't teach us. The evidence is being purged from libraries, so lies carry more weight, they try to hide the core strength. People living without the trivium, unaware of the gift their ancestors have given them. It's been hidden, but to get the facts, you know you gotta get your whip, hat and coat and dig like Indiana Jones. Before you can take the power back, I don't know where the power's at. Tragedy and hope. Before you can take the power back, I don't know where the power's at. Tragedy and hope. MK Ultra, something maybe we might should know about. Building 7, something maybe we might should know about. John O'Neill, something maybe we might should know about. The dancing Israelis, something maybe we might should know about. USS Liberty, something maybe we might should know about. For agreement, something maybe we might should know about. Bohemian Grove, something maybe we might should know about. British East India Company, something maybe we might should know about. Operation Mockingbird, something maybe we might should know about. Operation Paperclip, something maybe we might should know about. Ruby Ridge, something maybe we might should know about. Opium Wars, something maybe we might should know about. Before you can take the power back, I don't know where the power's at. Tragedy and hope. Before you can take the power back, I don't know where the power's at. Tragedy and hope. Tierra Griffin, rock on. Anthony Sutton, rock on. Frederick Bastiat, rock on. Richard Grove, rock on. James Corbett, rock on. Gary Webb, rock on. John Taylor Gatto, rock on. Gary Besmanoff, rock on. Eustace Mullins, rock on. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, rock on. General Smedley Butler, rock on. Carol Quigley, rock on. Before you can take the power back, I don't know where the power's at. Tragedy and hope. Before you can take the power back, I don't know where the power's at. Tragedy and hope.
Welcome, Truth Seeker. It's not easy to discern truth from fiction on holodeck Earth. Grand Theft World is a fire hose of illumination and inspires the hearts and minds of truthers seeking freedom in a world environment of manipulation and control. Richard Grove and Tony Myers take a deep dive into the people, places, and events that have shaped our world. Through a lens of critical thinking, to polish the gems and sort the chaff, to reveal the true machinations behind world events. Piece by piece, podcast by podcast, a portrait of reality emerges that we can use to take educated action in the fight for consciousness, truth, and freedom. Grand Theft World episodes include clips from the brightest and best podcasters and articles every week. A weekly special guest brings their expertise and knowledge. Join the vibrant GTW community of researchers and like-minded peers to collaborate on solutions and how we can truly create change. Take your first step on this adventure. Join now.
Welcome to the Grand Theft World podcast, hosted and sponsored by the members over at grandtheftworld.com. It's still cold here in the Northeast. It got warm for a couple days this week, and then it went down to like 20 degrees. So we're going to be here all night breaking open the news of the week. We're going to analyze it so you can understand and make better decisions in your life, because that's the whole point of the news. If you don't understand it, what can you do with making better choices or decisions for your family? A lot of things have happened in this past week we don't want to get caught up in some of the drama and hubbub. We want to be able to focus on the substantial things that you could look back 10 or 20 years from now and say, these are the big things that happened in the world this week. One of the things that happened in the United States military is Trump ordered that all trans military officers, candidates, all the way through the ranking system, all the way up to the 5-star generals, are being discharged from the military because they don't fit in with the mechanics of what military is supposed to be in this country. Elations came to the world this week as Elon Musk made some declarations about George Soros and his gaming of the system that heretofore, even on Twitter, was considered anti-Semitic to talk about George Soros wielding such power across America and the infrastructure that's supposed to be about freedom with his anti-democratic ideas. So it's a little bit more hope that these things have been going on for a long time. They were very tough to talk about, but now all of a sudden, the deep state is a known topic. George Soros is a known entity. NATO and other entities that have been looking to globalize the world and use America as the property manager and military-industrial complex to do that. Those things are getting a little tap on the brakes this past week. We had a $500 billion vaccine contract get stopped in its tracks by RFK Jr. Some of the things he's doing, nice. Some of the other things are very questionable. We're going to have to take a look at those and get into each case scenario. We can't just say he did some things, so it must be good. We have to take a look and compare and juxtapose those actions toward our freedom and liberty and the preservation of our rights. We took a big step this past week of keeping our tax dollars in our country and not going over to Ukraine. As Volodymyr Zelensky, he got kicked out of the White House. And I was watching the video. I was halfway through the video. I sent to my wife. I said, I've never seen anything like this. And then I saw him actually get kicked out. So, you can say it's it's like world wrestling and it's all actors. Or you can look at this as there might actually be legitimate changes being made step by step, maybe even unintentionally, that keep us away from World War III. And I think that's a good thing. The Americans here in this country who had hoped that Anna, Paulina, Luna, and all these other investigatory leaks are going to bring out the evidence. And here's the Epstein files. And America got rickrolled with that because the alleged leak of the first round of documents is nothing we haven't seen for the past 2 years anyway. But a lot of ado was made of that. We're not going to join into that hoopla without serious criticism of what is really going on and who are those documents protecting, because Epstein was an agent of another country, a foreign country that was blackmailing politicians in our country, which is highly illegal and should be prosecuted to the fullest extent. The FBI thus has panicked and started deleting all sorts of documents they shoulda, woulda, coulda given to Pam Bondi and the Justice Department a long time ago. So I'm thinking that metaphorically some heads are going to roll in that bureaucracy, because the people who got, I don't think it made Pam Bondi look good. I don't think it makes Kash Patel look good. I don't think it makes Dan Bongino look good. And I think that they're all going to be looking to save their reputation. And that's going to come at the cost of those politicians who were working with Epstein and going along with that espionage, which should be prosecuted to the fullest extent. The world found out this week that 100% of Girl Scout cookies have pesticides and 90% have value-added inserts like lead and arsenic. I'm sure you might have suspected it, but now it's a known. And the next time you see the sales gangs out there pushing that type of crack, walk the other way. Last but not least, Fauci. He's got pardoned, right? So he's untouchable. 17 states don't care. They're going after him for various types of fraud and injurious behavior that he has caused them and their constituents. And I think that's another good sign, because those companies that told us that they should have protection from liability, and yet their products were claimed to not cause anything that needed liability in the first place. I think that is now coming on to be proven quite the contrary. There's a Yale study from this past week that shows the mRNA gene therapy, it changes people's bodies forever in a way that they did not have an informed consent over. And I think a lot more information on that is coming from that direction. So we're going to see what happens to Fauci and Daszak and EcoHealth and all the other DARPA Renfields who helped to put those gene factories into those people. I think we need to have that adjudicated very quickly and not go any further with these people until we have some justice. All right, so without further ado, let's go to this week's report from Luke Radowski of wearechange.org and thebestpoliticalshirts.com. Let's see what his perspective is on world events, and then we'll get into the various stories we're going to unpack throughout tonight's show.
Be ending well.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about it.
From the very beginning of the war.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now.
Oh boy, as the situation just got that much more tumultuous, that much more dangerous, as a lot of people were talking about World War III. Again, as there's a new battlefront being laid out with a larger potential economic war that could potentially join Russia and the United States against China. Yep, we're talking about rare earth minerals. I talked to some insiders in the industry about this larger issue, and oh boy, there are some big bombshells to really comprehend and understand here, especially when it comes to securing a lot of these important resources for the future of hegemony on the planet. Again, we're going to get into it, but first of all, so much blowback against Volodymyr Zelensky. There's politicians within Ukraine calling for him to step down. Elon Musk, who, by the way, has been providing Starlink communication devices to Ukraine that has made a huge difference for them on the battlefield, now is openly criticizing Volodymyr for saying, oh yeah, no peace deal, no raw mineral earth deal, nothing. And he, of course, went back to Ukraine, as now he is criticizing these larger kind of PR moves and PR stunts that are, according to a lot of people, distasteful, as his men are being grabbed up on the street and literally sent over to the front lines to fight this larger proxy war that clearly a lot of people want to end. Why isn't it ending? Well, according to Elon Musk, I think he represents this scenario here perfectly with this meme highlighting Zelensky at the railroad tracks. But instead of there being two, there's only one. And there's a sign saying you could stop the tram at any moment, but you refuse because you need guarantees that it won't start moving again in a few years. That's the situation. That's the scenario right now, with the train car going over all of the flesh and human bodies of young Slavic men that are being sacrificed in record numbers. Absolutely tragic what is going on here, as Elon Musk has called for peace for a long time now. If you look at the larger peace deal that he propositioned about 2 years ago, he was viciously attacked by the Ukrainians, by the corporate media, by the government, saying, how dare he propose a peace plan here? And when you look at his peace plan here, it would have saved a lot of Ukrainian lives. It would have saved a lot of Ukrainian territory. And if we would have listened to, alternative independent media that has been also calling for the same kind of deal to be made here from day one, deals that have been sabotaged by Western leaders that literally fly into Ukraine as soon as the deals are met and say, no, you're not going to sign this. You're not going to do this. You're going to walk away from the table, even though you just agreed to this. When you have those type of levels of treacherous actions, it really does make you wonder what in the world is going on here, as the world wants peace and all we're getting is kind of arguments and ego and snarky comments. As allegedly there's a lot of people now coming forward and saying that Zelensky called J.D. Vance, the vice president of the United States, a suka, which isn't the nicest of names to call him. These larger kind of representations of Ukrainian soldiers on the front lines going after representations of Trump and MAGA, shooting it, lighting it on fire, doesn't help the larger situation here, as one of the biggest countries that has been at odds with the United States when it comes to their recent regime kind of implementation of peace deals and talks here. When it comes to the larger shift that just happened here, the UK has been some of the biggest outspoken critics against a larger peace deal here. And that is, of course, why Volodymyr Zelensky went right to the United Kingdom and said, hey, let's go, guys. You guys talked about sending troops on the front lines. Germany was like, no, Nine, no. And the British were like, oh, crap, we're kind of in this on our own there, because you are. And this is why Zelensky went right over to the United Kingdom, as the United Kingdom has been one of the biggest proponents of escalating, continuing this larger war. And guess what? They're not as gracious as the United States was under the previous administrations, as they're now offering him, a pesky little small $2.26 billion loan. That's it. The United States gave money for free. All right. Zelensky's like, this is a grant. All the other European countries giving stuff, they're getting it back. They have guarantees. I'll get some money back. Now, the UK, right after this tremendous moment with Trump, with the United States cutting off specific infrastructure that they were sending over to the United Kingdom with their energy grids that just stopped, the UK so graciously offered them a $2.26 billion loan that, of course, they have to pay back and give guarantees to, as NATO gave a big kind of refreshing moment here to Zelensky here, as we have the NATO chief, Mark Rutte, coming out to the president of Ukraine and saying, hey, you got to restore relations with the United States and Donald Trump, because if you don't, it's not looking good for NATO, that a lot of geopolitical experts believe is at its wit's end and could potentially be officially destroyed, as the United States finances a lot of NATO as well, in a significant portion that Donald Trump is asking some serious questions about, as now there might be a potential raw mineral deal with Russia. What in the world is going on here? Well, it's a crazy moment. It's a crazy time that we're seeing unfolding here, but it could actually be a strategy that could potentially counter China. Before talking about that, we want to talk about one of our sponsors of today's video, and that is American Tungsten. And I can't believe this ad fell into my lap at this specific time, because minerals on U.S. soil, it is 100% imported from other countries. The metal is essentially for military applications. This is gross incompetence. The U.S. imports 27% of its supply from its only formidable enemy, according to a lot of geopolitical experts, China. Tungsten has a very unique characteristics which makes it indispensable in modern industry, technological, and to secure key strategy partnerships and non-dilutive financing with U.S. Department of Defense and Department of Energy. Conduct your own due diligence, and we want to thank them for working with us and specifically sponsoring this video at this extremely very opportune time, as all of this is specifically unfolding, as of course Donald Trump specifically just also announced this not so long ago, which I think is of key importance here.
To further return production to the United States, we're going to environmentally free up our rare earth minerals. We have some unbelievable sites. We have some of the best rare earth anywhere in the world, but we're not allowed to use it because the environmentalists got there first. They said, you cannot touch that land. I look at the land, looks like every other piece of land. What is it? Well, this is very protected. They have no idea what they're doing to our country. They use the environment to stop progress, so we're not going to let that happen.
Yep, and it definitely does look like this is going to be a major strategy of Donald Trump, of our foreign policy, not to be dependent on foreign countries, but to, of course, have our own rare earth minerals that we are able to, of course, advance things like artificial intelligence with, as a lot of geopolitical experts are saying China is having her lunch, and that's why we're seeing Donald Trump emphasize this larger kind of deal here that now Russia might be making with the United States. This is big news. This is huge news. As of course, we found out that Zelensky wasn't for this deal and already 2 times said no to it. Originally saying yes and then saying, no, I don't want a rare earth mineral deal. And then saying yes and then no, I don't want it again. So there was a lot of back and forth here until we had this massive blow up inside of the White House, which of course was supposed to be the official signing of this rare earth mineral deal, which didn't happen. As now Vladimir Putin is hinting at offering rare earth minerals to the United States, a part of a larger geopolitical economic move, which would probably officially anger China significantly. There definitely hasn't been any kind of love affair between China and Russia historically, even though the two are being brought closer because of the previous old neocon American foreign policy. But now Vladimir Putin kind of speaking in very open ways, saying, yeah, I'm kind of open to an American partnership. The Ukrainians aren't open to it. Well, maybe I am.
Либо предложить и американским нашим партнерам, когда я партнеры говорю, имею в виду
He's saying, I mean, to specifically work with the administration and the government here and private companies. If they show interest in working together, Russia possesses significant, and I want to stress this, significant larger resources of this kind than Ukraine. Russia is one of the uncontested when it comes to the rare and rare earth metal resources. We have deposits in the north, in Murmansk, and then the Caucasus, and then the Balkans, and then he goes on specifically saying, you know what? Even the rare earth minerals that are critical that the United States wants out of Ukraine, well, 22 out of the 34 of those minerals are specifically now partly controlled by Russia. And it is old Ukrainian territory that now the Russians have, of course, occupied and taken for themselves. Now, what will be the future of that territory? Well, I think now we're going to have different kind of negotiations at play here, as it looks like Putin could help Donald Trump challenge China's stronghold on these rare earth minerals. Donald Trump, again, is on this larger quest for a very specific reason. What's going to be next here? Well, hopefully it will be the restarting of negotiations. Hopefully cooler minds prevail. Hopefully Zelensky now comes to the negotiation table and says, yeah, let's actually have some peace here. Let's actually negotiate here. Let's actually make some money. Let's work together here, as the Ukrainians have also been working very closely with the Chinese. They have a lot of economic partnerships and ties with them as well. So the situation is obviously very complicated. But right now, with the breakdown of communication, and I've warned about this too, because I said, hey, these are high-level talks. I know Trump's talking a big game here. He promised to end the war here, but if the end doesn't come soon, and if the negotiations fail, this is going to lead to larger escalations, which I still think, it's very possible to happen here domestically inside of the United States. As now Macron is saying, no, it's not Zelensky who is playing with World War III, as accused officially by Donald Trump. And the French president now is saying it's Putin. It's Putin who's playing World War III. Where it looks like, let's be honest here, Putin's trying to make a deal here. And whatever you might think of him, whether you like him or you don't like him here, I think it's fair to assess, according to a lot of people here, that if we have the prospects of making money, if we have the prospects of building and growing and expanding human civilization rather than blowing itself up, I think that's something that we should strive for. As seeing these kind of larger kind of blow-ups on national television isn't comforting, especially for a lot of the people that are on the front lines right now, sent there by their politicians. Again, a lot of people are saying, hey, there's a big prospect here of this totally getting completely out of control. And let's be honest here, that's the situation that we're living in right now. And it's not a very comfortable situation. How will all of this kind of unfold? How will this kind of proceed? How will this all kind of move forward? It's going to be interesting to see. And again, no one really knows. The situation is extremely volatile. And I wish I had a freaking magic ball where I could see into the future here, because truly I think it's uncertain. I think the Ukrainians will now, understanding the larger severity, I don't know what they're doing here, because they're clearly acting wild. They're clearly going to the United Kingdom right afterwards. The same United Kingdom that threatened to have British troops on the ground there. The British Army and military isn't doing too good, okay? Especially with its proficiency, especially with its larger problems that it's dealing with internally, and with extremely low recruitment numbers, and with equipment that isn't the best, and larger kind of case studies looking into how a lot of them are just not operational at all. It does signal, even though the UK is a nuclear power, it does signal that that they're just talking wild. And I think if there ever was a time to not talk wild, if there ever was a time to be humble, to be respectful, to be calm, and let the egos kind of go here, it is now. And I think we should be striving towards doing everything we can to allow cooler heads to prevail, to propel this larger peace deal. If you agree, share this video. Thank you to our sponsor for working with us. Very timely that they just have, a stock that they wanted us to tell you about.
Pull it. I'm relatively sure. We're going to have to check this out, because this isn't the show where we speculate. But there's a replacement for gold. So when they drill out the gold bricks, I was pretty sure that the Chinese were filling it with tungsten, which had a close enough molecular weight value that you couldn't tell. And that was a way that they were counterfeiting gold bricks. And I just think that if they're trying to like get enough tungsten to refill up Fort Knox, that it might be a good time to invest. If that is indeed the mineral that they were replacing gold bricks. Otherwise, it's not funny. But we'll have to wait and see to see if that punchline cashes at the desk. Joining me tonight, as always, is Scott Armstrong. How are you doing, Scott?
What's up, Richard? Glad you're feeling better, man. Good to be back, ready to rock and roll. Thank you so much.
Also joining us tonight is first-time co-host Paul Verge.
How you doing tonight?
I'm doing wonderfully well. How you doing, Paulie?
Wonderful. I'm just happy to be here and glad to see that you're on the mend.
The universe has smiled upon our endeavor because the United States government just extradited 39 cartel leaders from Mexico, some of whom participated in the Kiki Camarena murder. And that is a project that you and I worked on a couple of years ago called Kilos. So we'll actually be able to get into some interesting history tonight, upon your first appearance. It's just like the universe winked and nodded at us this week. And after 40 or 50 years of that case being open, I think that's also worthy of putting it on the record because that type of skullduggery continues to go on today.
Serendipity, my friend.
Serendipity, it is. 2025 is the year of a whole bunch of change. You know, Cat Williams said everything's coming out in 2024, but everything's hitting the ground in 2025. So just because it came out, it was floating around. Now everything's coming down. And I think people are getting a much clearer perspective on the likes of the people who have been running the world during most of our lives, and their time is coming to an end. So I'm pretty excited. All right, tonight we have a couple miscellaneous, and then we have a whole bunch of serious blocks of things that have happened in stories that need to be documented in a very specific way to have the elucidatory understanding that usually yields from watching a Grand Theft World episode. So we're going to start out with some Second Amendment news. Kid with gun shoots two armed intruders and kills them, thus saving his life and protecting family. Crowder bits. John Oliver is a pussy, which is about a half-hour segment. We don't have time for the whole thing, but I want to give you the gist.
A huge pussy.
Yeah. And it's a freedom of speech rant. I thought we should include it. And then Daily Show, Jon Stewart got schooled by somebody who wants to talk in circles about audits, and it fried his brain in a way that we definitely have to take a look at it. We're going to go to Warren Smith, PhD, for that because he's got a good critical thinking insight on that. And then we'll come back and discuss. But I think I don't want to be like everything good is happening and nothing bad's happening. But I think it is important, especially over the past 20 years of it's just mostly bad stuff happening, that we need to document the good things that are winning for freedom, regardless of it's MAGA or MAHA or that stuff not working because RFK Jr. is calling for measles vaccines again because of the outbreak. So there's a whole bunch of stuff. We have to sort it out. It's not just going to all just fit together nicely as given because that's not what news does. Understanding just doesn't yield from watching clips. We got to process them. So without further ado, let's go to Colion Noir and learn about the Second Amendment saving somebody's life.
State troopers are investigating a deadly home invasion.
And KSB says the two who died were not victims, and the shooter was younger than 18.
Would you look at that? A juvenile using a gun to protect himself or themselves. You see, lately there's been this debate about whether 18-year-olds should be allowed to own guns. People keep saying they shouldn't, but I've always said if you're old enough to take on adult responsibilities, like raising a family, you should have the ability to protect yourself. And this right here proves exactly why.
Two men broke into a home with plans to steal firearms from a safe. They were met by an armed juvenile. At around 4:30 Saturday, the Manchester Police Department responded to a house in the city of Manchester. There they determined the two men had forced their way into the house. The juvenile resident of the home found the intruders holding firearms and allegedly acted in self-defense, shooting the two men before escaping through a bedroom window. The two men were later identified as Roger Smith of McKee and Jeffrey Allen of Manchester. Both have since died.
This isn't even about an 18-year-old. This is a juvenile, someone younger than that, who used a gun to protect themselves. Two grown men broke into the house armed, looking to steal guns. The kid shot them both and got out through the bedroom window. Now those two men are dead. And this is exactly why it matters. This is the perfect example of what happens when kids are taught firearm responsibility instead of being taught to fear guns. These kids took on two adult men with guns by themselves. If that's not equality, I don't know what is. This is exactly why a gun is called the great equalizer. It doesn't matter how strong you are, how big you are, or how many people are against you. A gun balances the fight. And yet, people don't want kids learning how to use firearms safely. The operative word being safely. They freak out when they hear about parents taking their kids shooting or teaching them gun safety. But here's the thing. I don't have kids, but every kid I've ever met who was raised around guns the right way is usually exceptionally well behaved. Why? Because they understand responsibility. It's bigger than just knowing how to shoot. Teaching kids about guns teaches them about life. It shows them that actions have consequences. It shows them that something as small as pulling a trigger can mean the difference between life and death. And that sticks with them. Speaking of self-defense, let's talk about what happens after you use your gun. Because here's the reality. Even if you're 100% justified, you could still be facing hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees. Take Millie Mills, a 67-year-old grandmother from Compton, California. She was attacked, pursued, and cornered by a group of men. She fired her gun in self-defense, and then she got arrested.
The amount of money to defend me, over $500,000. I don't have that.
$500,000 to a 67-year-old great-grandmother living in Compton, California. The significance of that. Where would she be right now? She leaves and she doesn't come back that evening.
A large white car swerved across the front of me.
This same vehicle now bumps into the backside of her car.
I was terrified.
An individual appears at her window.
And that's where the USCCA comes in. Millie had legal protection through USCCA, and they covered her entire defense. Her attorney was at her side within hours, and that's not just some one-time thing. This is what the USCCA does. If you ever have to use your firearm in self-defense, they help you find an attorney, post bail, and fight your case.
I have to take my shoes off and go to a cell. I was in the cell probably about maybe an hour. And they said, your attorney says you're going to be bailed out as soon as we know the bail amount. The bail that was put on me was for $50,000. So I had $2,000 cash at my house.
They don't see the real impact, but when the kid learns about a firearm the right way, they learn that it's serious. They learn that it's not a toy. But when kids don't learn about firearms responsibly,
anytime you lie to what is supposed to be a free public, anytime you lie to them, you are putting them at risk. That's the truth. The Biden administration lied. And right now, John Oliver is lying to you. Moving on to what we're talking about, fascism. I would argue that there are plenty of fascists in UK Parliament. And I would argue that there are plenty of fascists actually in the comedy scene, both in Europe and stateside. What do I mean by that? I mean people who would eliminate voices of dissent at a moment's notice if they had that ability. You don't judge a party or an ideological group by merely what they do now. You judge them by what they would do if they had completely unfettered power. And I think people like John Oliver, and you can use the umbrella here of big government liberals in Europe, I think they certainly qualify. I would argue that they are far more fascist than any member of the AfD, member of this administration, or certainly anyone in this studio. I want to be very clear here. As we move on in this segment, at no point am I advocating for the removal or censorship of John Oliver. I don't want to happen to John Oliver exactly what his managing company has done to us, Avalon, right? Every time we criticize him, every time we do a rebuttal, which falls squarely under fair use, we get removed. That segment gets removed because John Oliver can't handle criticism. Respect where it's due to Jon Stewart, to even, I would say, Jimmy Kimmel. They at least leave it up.
Yeah.
John Oliver has every single one removed, and it's manually done. So
right now, if you are watching on YouTube, please go to Rumble and download the Rumble app. That's the best way you can stay in touch. You'll only get notifications when we are live on Rumble. It's the best way to not be beholden to an algorithm. Rumble, we own live, and none of these critiques, none of these rebuttals get to take place if not for Rumble Premium members. It's $99 annually. You can try it for $9.99 a month. Rumble Premium is Mug Club. Mug Club is Rumble Premium. That's why we don't have to worry about being half of big tech censorship.
Tonight, let's take a look at the challenges of content moderation, how Facebook's faced them in the past, and what might have led to its new approach. And let's start with the challenges, because from the very beginning of the modern internet, there were concerns about what was on it.
Time for the latest installment of John Oliver is a big fat pussy.
I am a pussy, and that is frankly a wild thing to say. I'm telling you, I am a pussy. Oh, sorry if this is how you found out, but I'm telling you that I am a pussy.
Favorite singer ever.
It's pretty good.
And for those of you saying that's ad hominem, yes, it's true because it's true. But let me explain to you the context. I use the term, I do use it as a pejorative. Mm-hmm. And by that, I mean that he embodies all of the negative feminine qualities that one would imagine, just like when you call someone a prick, it's a gendered pejorative, in that he is a gossip and he won't deal with confrontation head on as a man should, and he refuses to not only face criticism or face the people he accuses, but he actually has them removed from the public square. I think that is quite cowardly, and I think it makes him a... Now... What? Some of these clips are going to be shorter because maybe they can argue that the clips are too long. So maybe this will stay on YouTube, right? Right, Avalon, John Oliver, come on, sack up. Here's the first claim that he makes here. All references available, link in the description as we do every single show, something John Oliver may want to consider. Please peruse them. Makes the claim that Section 230 gives platforms the ability to moderate without fear, that's why it exists.
But mostly, it allows them to moderate without fear, which is good. Because as scholars will tell you, content moderation is absolutely key to making the internet bearable.
Okay, here's the truth. That's the exact opposite of what 230 was designed to do. 230 was meant to promote speech, not to censor it. 230 allows these big platforms, big tech platforms, to be treated as de facto utility companies. So for example, like public utilities, like your phone service. Verizon or AT&T, if you guys don't have Pure Talk yet, or T-Mobile, they can't remove you, they can't deny you service if you say, hey, I hope the AfD wins the election in Germany, even if they don't like your opinion. Why? Because that would be a violation of them being a public utility. They are not a publisher like New York Times who can moderate not only the comments, but whoever actually publishes content on their platform. So Facebook, YouTube, Google, X, they were being treated far more like a public utility. That's what 230 was designed to do, which means that comes with the responsibilities of not censoring speech. So Congress explicitly stated in Section 230, the internet offers a forum for a true diversity of political discourse, unique opportunities for cultural development, and myriad avenues for intellectual activity. Here's the really scary truth is that the left misinterprets that very narrow window of content moderation that is permitted through Section 230, and that's what they focus on. So there's a very narrow window. In other words, to say, yeah, so 230 means that you can't moderate content, that you can't censor content outside of these bounds of the law, right? And they go, well, see, that means that we actually have the right, they should be censoring content. No, that's like saying, hey, hold on a second. Yeah, of course, everyone has to be allowed unless someone's committing a crime. So no one's allowed. No, but that's not the point. Section 230 specifically limits what platforms can moderate without becoming publishers, which means they are not, once they're a publisher, they're not protected from liability.
Right.
230 protects them from liability if some, let's say, Nazi posts a comment that actually is Nazi-like. In other words, YouTube can't be liable for that. Why? Because they're a public utility. They're not censoring. So it's not their responsibility if it is used as a utility. Now, if they censor too much, that means they are effectively communicating a point of view.
Yeah.
Which means they're a publisher, like the New York Times, like Washington Post. So This is the limitation of what they can moderate. To content limited. That is, quote, obscene, lewd, lascivious, filthy, excessively violent, harassing, or otherwise objectionable. That's the catch-all category that the left uses, the otherwise objectionable. But it's very clear that otherwise objectionable must relate to the words that directly precede it. So let me give you an example. Opinions, for example, on politics, or even opinions that you may not like on vaccines, are not obscene, they are not lewd, they are not lascivious, filthy, or excessively violent. So otherwise objectionable cannot just apply to anything you don't like, it has to apply to the definitions that are very clearly outlined before it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
And you have no recourse. That is the problem with 230, because literally you basically go 230, 230, 230, 230, all the way up to the Supreme Court, and then hope you get a first you hope it gets taken by the Supreme Courts, then you hope you get a victory.
Right.
They are hiding behind 230.
Exactly.
As well.
230 doesn't protect Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube's right. It doesn't protect their right to say you can't post a story about an mRNA injection side effect. It doesn't protect them from saying, actually, you know what, you're not allowed to post about information that suggests maybe this virus leaked from a lab. It doesn't protect them from saying, actually, you know what, we don't like the Hunter Biden laptop story, which we'll get to, so we're actually just going to ban it. As a matter of fact, that would be a direct violation, and they should be fined billions of dollars. They should be held liable immediately. Either they're a publisher or they're a platform. I have been saying it since 2012, if you want to go back far enough. Here's another claim that John Oliver makes. A comedian who doesn't believe in free speech, that conservatives were never targeted by big tech to censor.
One has been conservatives repeatedly painting normal content moderation as political persecution.
Big tech's out to get conservatives. That's not a suspicion. That's not a hunch. That's a fact.
We've seen the big tech has been censoring us.
The American people are being censored. Conservatives are being censored. The information that's flowing to the American people is being censored. It's just the bottom line.
Okay, that is obviously all bull.
Well, if it's obvious, provide your references.
Yeah.
If it's so obvious, provide. That's right. You never do, aside from when we see an overlay that says Salon or Slate. Here's the truth. Conservatives are very clearly targeted and censored. Again, this is empirically available through the data. They're banned at rates that are about 4.5 times the rate of those on the left. Okay, let me give you some quick examples. President Trump banned from Twitter, Facebook in 2021. 2022, you had Dan Bongino banned from YouTube, now going to be deputy over there at the FBI. Let's just give you some examples with us, right? The Twitter files named us as a platform, as a profile that was to be censored, throttled on their platform. Obviously, these Twitter files revealed censorship against the 2020 election, questioning it, the COVID lockdowns, the COVID vaccines. In 2019, we were at the center of the Vox apocalypse, where it was proven that we didn't violate any policies, but we were just demonetized, which is why we need your support over there at Rumble Premium, because we don't make any ad dollars on YouTube. Do you think that that might be some kind of censorship if you allow people to espouse outright communist views on YouTube and be monetized, but you demonetize, ergo throttle, shadow ban a channel that expresses, I don't know, pro-life views, that there are only two genders, those kinds of views, that maybe it wasn't the most free and fair election of all time, those kinds of views? Also, I believe in 2019, it might have been 2018, that's how I met my half-Asian lawyer, Bill Richmond. Engadget published an article about demonetization. There was also an article about Facebook throttling. Specifically, people named the Chris Kyle Foundation, Ted Cruz for President, Breitbart, and yours truly. That's how I met my lawyer. We ended up handling that out of court. Notice we're still on Facebook. It was so bad, just us right here. I don't know if you think that we've said anything objectionable enough to warrant being deplatformed, to warrant being demonetized, to warrant being shadow banned, throttled, to the point where we've had to create our own separate platform. People said, create your own YouTube. Well, we have. Everyone migrate over to Rumble. YouTube is dead. It got so bad that the known Marxist Senator Hirono was outraged that we weren't completely banned. It wasn't enough.
YouTube dragged its feet before taking any action against conservative commentator Steven Crowder, despite being informed of Crowder's 2-year homophobic harassment campaign against journalist Carla Maza. When YouTube did finally take action, it took the half measure of removing advertisements from Crowder's videos rather than removing him from the platform entirely.
Advertisement.
And also,
No, it's
Carlos,
advertisements.
we called Carlos Maza a lispy queer. I can say that, right?
Yeah.
So that's fine. Not Carla.
Yeah.
Maza. You just trans.
You just dead named the lispy queer.
Yeah. Why would you do that?
He also called himself queer, joked about his lisp, and I think his handle was gay wonk. And he wasn't the only person at Vox who we criticized.
And it wasn't a campaign. It was more of an adventure.
Also, I didn't just say lispy queer. I said fairy.
Yes.
Sprite. I believe light in the loafers. There are a bunch of terms that were used. They were all fun.
Who was your campaign manager for this campaign that you put together?
And actually, though, here's the good news. We will always welcome on voices that differ from our own. So after 6 years have passed, we're going to allow bygones to be bygones, and hopefully we have her on the line. We actually have Senator Hirono on the line to comment right now. Senator Hirono, welcome back to the show.
Hello, Stephen. Now, before we begin, I want to remind you that this conversation is on the record.
Okay.
And I will hold you accountable.
Well, I expect no less from you. I wanted to talk with you today about how you encouraged the outright censorship ban on me 6 years ago.
Well, maybe we can get together sometime and, discuss things further.
I don't know if that has any...
We can have a picnic under the stars where you can give me a hot lunch.
Okay, Senator.
My lunchbox is ready for you, Stephen.
Senator, that is unbecoming of a public servant.
It's hot and steamy in there, just how you like.
Oh, my God.
I'll bring some salad.
Well, I like a good salad.
And then you can toss it for me.
That's not the definition. That's not, has nothing to do with the lunch.
Hey, Stephen, do you like poke bowls?
Actually, yeah. I mean, I'm not sure how to answer it, but I do, actually.
I'm not hearing an answer to my question.
Okay, yes. Poke bowls are delightful. I'm a fan.
I'll let you poke my bowl, Stephen.
Senator, that is completely inappropriate.
You can be my bucking bronco.
No.
Would you like to give me a Cleveland Steamer?
This has nothing to do with what we're discussing. Stop.
And then you can finish with a dirty
I don't want to do that. No, Tim, cut it.
Stephen, I'm horny.
That took a turn.
Jesus, saucy minx.
The next claim that John Oliver makes, and they love to do this, they try and steer into it to cut it off at the pass, right? Conservatives are not being censored. They are. The Hunter Biden laptop was inconsequential. No, it wasn't. So he tries to say the Hunter Biden laptop was actually never censored. You dreamt that.
Back in 2020, while Trump was president, social media sites got a warning from the FBI to look out for hack and leak operations before the election. Then, in October, the New York Post ran a story based on files from a laptop they claimed belonged to Hunter Biden, which had been given to them by Steve Bannon and Rudy Giuliani. Facebook and Twitter were wary of the story. Twitter briefly didn't allow people to post links to it, and Facebook allowed the story to be seen and shared, but limited the article's reach, only to remove that restriction soon after.
Just that wordplay. Here's the truth. It was real, it was authentic, and it would have made a difference in the 2020 election. I love it. They were wary of the article. Okay, why? Well, because the FBI reached out to them. They allowed it to be posted, but they reduced its reach. Okay, so it doesn't exist. Just think about that for a second. They reduced its reach. Yeah. So if you post something that is incredibly important, as far as information to the American public, and these people, at the behest of the FBI, decide they're just going to limit its reach, you can post it, but your own subscribers, your own viewers can't see it. Does it exist?
Yeah, this was a massive story. Everybody was talking about, all of a sudden, gone.
Yes.
And then a week later, they're like, all right, you can post it again. Wait a minute, why don't you just unfreeze the other post with all the likes, all the mentions, all of the algorithmic favorite stuff that's going on with this thing? No, you can repost it. That's just as good. No, it's really not.
The reason that it wasn't being allowed to spread was because the FBI, for example, met at least 5 times with Google alone prior to the 2020 election. 5 times the FBI met with them. While the FBI had the laptop and they knew that it was legit.
Yep.
They had already procured the laptop. It had already been authenticated. They knew that it was real, and they met 5 times just with Google. I'm willing to bet dozens of times with the heads of big tech to ensure that it wasn't allowed to be a story that the American public knew about. By the way, this is the laptop that Mayor Giuliani authenticated for the first time, showed it to the world live on our show. Have you seen the pictures?
This guy.
Have you seen the pictures of him with the crack pipe?
John Wright, I have.
Oh, wow. Does he at least look like cool?
Unfortunately, I can't show them to you right now, but this is the hard drive they're on right there.
Gosh. Oh, my word. And Mark, I didn't know what I was looking at. I had a tiny monitor. Like, okay.
John, you're right, I do.
And people now saying about Mark Zuckerberg, they're saying, oh, well, he's just doing this now. He's trying to appease the people in power. Well, okay, sure. But if he's trying to appease the current administration in power by saying, we are not going to censor opposing points of view on Facebook anymore, that's different from him having to appease those in power under the Biden administration. And he admitted to doing that. He admitted to being pressured by Biden to censor content as it related to COVID, as it related to elections, and he apologized for it. In other words, the pressure being applied is not for the same reason. One applied pressure to censor. One has applied pressure to no longer censor. Can you spot the difference as far as how relevant this was? Again, no one could reach it at that time, and everyone thought for a good period of time what he omits, people thought it was a
Jon Stewart here makes a very compelling argument for Doge.
But generally, those audits aren't $400 billion for Raytheon and $1.7 trillion for a plane that doesn't seem to be doing. Like, there is a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse within a system.
There are many things I disagree with Jon Stewart on. In this specific exchange, though, he's calling out something that is, regardless of where you fall on the political spectrum, is objectively unacceptable.
Good journalism uncovers corruption. And
okay, I mean, good journalism does uncover corruption, but I'm not sure these two things are linked. An audit is not.
But they are.
I think he is in line with reality here, which is why he's able to just decimate the defense deputy secretary.
The ability to pass an audit or the fact that the DOD has not passed an audit is not suggestive of waste, fraud, and abuse. That is completely false right there.
You're going to have to explain that one.
So what is
now
it
is the question of it's suggestive that we don't have an accurate inventory that we can pull up of what we have where.
You don't know where the money went. You don't know what you have or where it went, when.
That is not the same as saying we can't do that because waste, fraud, and abuse has occurred.
So in my world, that's waste.
How is that waste?
If I give you $1 billion and you can't tell me what happened to it, that to me is wasteful. That means you are not responsible.
That is the very problem that Doge is trying to address today.
Do you feel like these are unfair questions of somebody within a department of that size and scope? Do you feel that it's somewhat unfair?
You have a particular thing you really want to talk about and you're asking me other questions, but I don't think it's unfair to ask me about the audit.
Jon Stewart does a good job of not getting bogged down in the game that she's trying to play, which is a game of definitions, and focuses on the larger issue of incompetence.
I mean, do you understand what an audit does and the degree to which it is linked to the question that you're asking?
I believe so.
Okay, go ahead. Give me your explanation.
No, I don't mind learning. So
he does a good job of taking the position of I'm genuinely in the pursuit of trying to find the least bad approach to this problem. If you can offer something better, I'm genuinely open to that, and that's highly effective.
Audits and waste, fraud, and abuse are not the same thing. So let's decompose these pieces.
Please educate me on
Sure.
What
so an audit is exactly what you just described,
Yes.
which is, do I know what was delivered to which place?
Which we do not. We do not know where that money went. Does that indicate waste, potential fraud? Is it abuse?
So what I would suggest is that the audit that they have in the military doesn't really look at whether or not there's efficacy. It's just whether they got delivered the thing that they ordered. And
that is any audit. That is any audit. That is true.
But generally, those audits aren't $400 billion.
Even if there's not an absolute correlation between the definition of, well, that's not technically waste because it's not technically gone, we just don't know where it is.
But if you can't tell me where it went, then what am I supposed to think?
Yeah, it's indicative of incompetence and negligence.
And when there has been reporting, I mean, this is not, look, I'm not saying this is on you. and that you caused this. But I think it's a tough argument to
I'm pretty
make
sure I
that.
didn't cause it.
And
Yeah, he does a good job by pulling back, making it clear that he's not trying to attack her specifically. He's trying to get at the underlying truth.
it's a tough argument to
I'm pretty
make
sure I didn't
that
cause it.
an $850 billion budget to an organization that can't pass an audit and tell you where that money went, like, I think most people would consider that somewhere in the realm of waste, fraud, or abuse, because they would wonder why that money isn't well accounted for.
You should be able to do those things. The fact that you cannot do those things is an abuse of your position. And it's very difficult to contend with that because it is a noble pursuit. Anything in contrast to that, if not that very thing, will fall short.
And especially when they see food insecurity on military bases, and they see.
You want to talk about that? Because that's a good, we should be talking. I mean,
Well,
I'm
it's
trying to
all-
understand
is-
where you're trying to go, other than the dollars.
And when you have one person just trying to evade and debate semantics, and the other person is genuinely trying to communicate something more basic and simple, which is the pursuit of truth and a logical correlation, this is what it looks like when those two come up against each other.
I mean, we got out of 20 years of war and the Pentagon got a $50 billion raise. Like, that's shocking to me. Now, I may not understand exactly the ins and outs and the incredible magic of an audit, but I'm a human being who lives on the earth and can't figure out how $850 billion to a department means that the rank and file still have to be on food stamps. Like, to me, that's fucking corruption.
Yeah, he does a good job of keeping it simple, being like, yes, but I have two eyes and I can see what's in front of me. How could you find this to be acceptable, regardless of how you want to spin it, regardless of how you want to spin it as though I care about just the dollars, even if it doesn't correlate with the definition of what an audit is, the words. She's trying to do this semantic game, which cannot contend with the deeper game of, is this acceptable? Is this corrupt? Is this in line with what is logical or not? And those two games are very different games.
I'm not looking to pick a fight with you, but I am surprised at that the reaction to these questions are, you don't know what an audit is, bucko. Like, that's just weird to me.
When did uncovering corruption suddenly become bad? Because when this clip surfaced, every predominant left-leaning YouTube channel was praising him for calling out wasteful spending and corruption.
If that blows your mind, and if you think like that's like a crazy agenda for me to have, I really think that that's institutional thinking.
And that's something that we should all be able to agree upon. So what has happened to uncovering corruption? Why are we now opposed to Doge uncovering corruption? Well, this is before Doge existed. It'd be interesting to see how he feels about Doge now, given what he says in this clip. The reason this clip is so effective is because he is calling out waste blatantly.
Don't you think that that does speak to the larger point that we're trying to get at, which is good journalism uncovers corruption? And
Okay, I mean, good journalism does uncover corruption, but I'm not sure these two things are linked. An audit is not.
But they are.
It's interesting, though, why those same individuals have now lost that target. Why? Well, this was good then when Jon Stewart did it, but now that Elon Musk is doing it, it's problematic.
But problematic indeed. That's what I was trying to get to. I was too busy trying to make this document camera work, but I do think I have it working. All right, so before I do a deep dive into fascism, because John Oliver, I guess, doesn't know what fascism means, or maybe we don't know what fascism means, but that term gets thrown around quite a little bit out there in the world, and I think we need to check it out. But let's go over thoughts and observations. Who wants to go first?
Well, I mean, I'll just jump in and just be like, so the amount of unaccounted for dollars, I mean, I'm just looking up here, some figures, some speculate upwards of, $21 trillion. Oh, let me see if I can do this. Boom, $21 trillion that the Treasury can't account for. And a lot of that was Department of Defense, housing and urban development spending. So it's like, we've got just massive amounts of unaccounted for dollars just being flushed away through the Department of Defense, which, as we all know, like the Department of Defense, Pentagon, this is like such a pit for money being flushed, embezzled, and shot out to all these other entities. But then, not to mention, that doesn't even account for all like the off the books, like the black budget, like all those military operations that we know all about too. So it's like, it's just so beyond our ability to even comprehend. So if we're on the verge of accountability, then, that's pretty incredible stuff, because this has been like the scourge of humanity right here, really, for such a long time. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when I made the observation that our national debt just might be a running tab of all the money they've stolen from us, I was like half joking, but it almost looks like that's 100% true when you start adding up the trillions of fraud. It's like, there's 36 trillion in debt allegedly, and they're already rocking like close to 30 trillion in fraud. How much legit debt does America have? Maybe we're not in debt at all. Maybe we're a severely profitable country. Maybe the comprehensive annual financial reports or something like that would show that America has all these windfalls, and they just make us think we're broke, so we work our ass off all the time and pay exorbitant taxes without any questions, right? Because if we knew our country was really wealthy and we didn't have to do that, we might resist. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Imagine a scenario where you're paying compound interest on money that was stolen from you, and it's called a national debt just because, like national security or any of those other terms, it's just a useful term that couches what they're really doing, which is just a massive robbery. My other thought was, does Jon Stewart sort of control the Overton window? Because he seems to be the person who, like, if he talks about the lab leak, suddenly it's allowed to be talked about. If he says calm down about Doge, suddenly it's like, all right, maybe we should calm down about Doge. And I feel like in the mainstream, everyone's always pushing to one side of the Overton window, and then Jon Stewart, even though I think he's a plant, he suddenly is like, wait, I'm going to play the role of pushing a little bit back so we can freeze the Overton window in this one area.
Yeah, because
him and
the
Bill
Overton
Maher. Yeah, him and Bill Maher, like that's their role. Yeah.
Overton window ties into the financial window too, which Jon Stewart's brother, Larry Leibovitz, was in control of Wall Street. There was something, NASDAQ, very influential over Wall Street and those types of trends. So it wouldn't be a bad idea to have a guy like Jon Stewart run in front and point in front of millions of people to soften the blows or to hit the gas or hit the brake. You know what I'm saying? He could be a very useful tool in that tool shed of globalism that they have going on. And, because he's very, I'm not sure we have clips tonight, but I'm sure, Jon Stewart's probably trained with the IDF, just like Conan and a whole bunch of other people. Jerry Seinfeld.
Yeah. No, I think,
sure.
Yep.
So, I mean, there is a particular cat to keep in the bag during all this Epstein and JFK and all these other releases. There's still a certain ally, good time friend to the American people that has something to do with all these things that we're not being told about, and that influence is yet to be doged.
Yeah, I kind of noticed this strange coincidence between the 7 influencers who were given the Epstein binders, but I just couldn't put my finger on it, so I'm still trying to parse that one out. What do they all have in common? That could be a
Is it AIPAC
thread.
or Kufi? I'm trying to figure out which one. Is it the Christians United for Israel, or is it just straight up AIPAC? But yeah, that's going to continue to go on. I do have Monica Lewinsky Mossad evidence to present tonight, because that has been making the rounds, and I want people to know, like, that's been a known for like 20 years. Like, this is not these things that influencers on the conservative side have been circulating that they think is big news. Is like, these are known knowns for people who have the ability to read English, for instance, and go to Barnes and Noble or Amazon and read a book. So these deep secrets and disclosures about Epstein, I think still Whitney Webb has told us more about the Epstein network than any of these so-called leakers or people who actually have the evidence, the crime scene footage and all the other things, the hard drives, the blackmail. They've got to have books on all that money flowing back and forth and who's paid and who's not. and what they have on them and where it's stored. Like, they have to have an inventory of that, and none of that's been disclosed thus far. John Oliver and other people throw around the term fascist, right? And people think that's bad. I would agree. It's probably not a good thing. But what is the equal and opposite word to a fascist? Is there an equal, like on the scale? What's the word on the other side? Because fascism, by definition, only applies to conservative and right-wing politics. So it's always going to be the pejorative thrown by the progressive communist left, the collectivists, right? It's always going to be the pejorative used on any conservative Republican establishment movement, because that's literally, let's go to the Oxford English Dictionary. And if we just look up the word fascist, comes under fasces, which comes from the Roman fasci, which are axe and a bundle of sticks, unity and strength, plus a little monopoly on violence. That's where the fasces bundle comes from. But fascism is a right-wing system of government characterized by extreme nationalistic beliefs, strict obedience to a leader of the state, extreme right-wing, intolerant views or practices, and I'm sorry, I thought I had it on screen. And it comes from the Italian fascismo, for the Latin fascist bundle. So it only applies to the right wing. So you're always going to expect the left to use that as a pejorative term. I have not been able to find the equal and opposite. I can look up left wing and leftism, but they give you no such word that would be equivalent to fascism. The left side of a sports team, they also compare it in sports. And if you go to right wing, very much the same thing. Let's see, Rhodes Scholarship, right wing. There we go. Let's zoom in. The conservative or reactionary section of a political party or system, the right side of a sports team or field of an army, right? So they don't say right wing is fascist here, but when you look up the word fascist, it only applies to the right wing. Paul, is there a word in Canada that applies equal and opposite, or is it a place where we need a neologism maybe to fill the gap?
I always thought the term authoritarian was kind of all-encompassing of the Stalin-esque or Maoist type philosophy that was somebody should be telling you what to do at all times. I always thought fascism classically was the merger of government and corporations.
That's how Mussolini defined it back in the day. But and he was the known fascist of the time, right?
One of the purveyors of fascism, I thought. But, you know, the definition
irony was Hitler, he's a liberal progressive. He wasn't a
national
fascist.
Socialist.
He was a national socialist. So he's not. So when they equate fascist with Hitler, people don't know what they're talking about, and they expect us to just dumb ourselves down to be like, "You're right. That must be it." And they don't want to outgrow the obvious limitations on their indoctrination to actually know what they're talking about. They're not that interested. They just want you to know that you're wrong, even though they didn't have to do any work to figure that out. Right? That's the gist.
Well, and it's kind of used in a dismissive way to shut down conversation, right? I've noticed a lot of opportunities for people to converse, especially in good faith, often get shut down by an emotional reaction that results in somebody calling you a fascist or a Nazi or a supporter of this or that. And it's just a shortcut past your critical thinking to just like an emotional shutdown. And I think it's people's fight or flight mechanism kicking in because the media apparatus has heightened the emotions and turned up the temperature so much that people are extra reactionary. And so they're just not thinking straight.
So they're just intellectually bankrupt and we can leave them to Jesus?
I mean, everything's curable. I think what it is people are going through a process of detardation, whereby they are being emotionally triggered, facing the consequences of that triggering and the fallout that comes with it. And then what that follows up with is that you have to be inoculated from your intense emotional reactions, or it keeps being detrimental to your life. So it's just a process really of growing up and emotionally learning to handle your shit, so that when you come into contradictory information or information that causes cognitive dissonance, then you're able to actually ponder it for a second before freaking out. But that Trump derangement syndrome I used to make fun of, but now I've kind of convinced it's a real thing, even though I'm not a Trump supporter.
It absolutely is. I mean, I think on both sides it goes like, the last thing that, a leftist wants to be called is a Trump supporter, right? And they'll fight tooth and nail to avoid that. Same thing with like, people on the right. It's like they will fight tooth and nail and will risk, censoring their own speech to avoid being called a Nazi or a fascist, right? And so it's like, if you want to, like, my advice is like, if you get called a Nazi or a fascist, you guys just be like, yep. And they'll be like, but completely disarms them. So just, even though obviously you're not, you just be like, yep.
Well, in the rhetorical arts, that's called downstreaming their argument.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like judo, where you use their weight against them, right? They're running this way with the argument, so you just take the argument past where they want to take it and stop. Like, no, we're going to take it downstream and see what the consequences of that idea actually play out in reality. And then they're like, that's what, if there's a chance to break them out of their stupidity, other than having some sort of AA-like 12-step program for them to do that for themselves, I think it's either, Morpheus said it was a splinter in the mind, like the contradiction, the thing that doesn't make sense that they keep thinking about, and that's where the learning actually starts, right? That irritation, that grain of sand that helps them produce the pearl of wisdom that actually reflects reality, as opposed to the cartoonish caricatures that they're getting and repeating and parroting. And, the Latin word is citicism, to parrot. But that's basically what the indoctrination system sets people up to do, to react and to parrot, and then to discourage other people from thinking, because that would give them an advantage on you, and you don't want them to have an advantage like knowledge when they could just have the assumptions.
We're also kind of dealing with that phenomenon of extended adolescence. And I think there's a new phenomenon, which is like extended toddlerhood, or the terrible twos, and where people are so emotionally underdeveloped because they live in such a comfortable society that when they hear contrary things or something that causes cognitive dissonance or doesn't sound like the mainstream narrative, it causes such a radical shakeup. And if they just grew up or matured a little bit emotionally, they would be able to at least handle or consider that new information. And so as much as it's frustrating, I think the name of the game when dealing with people who are a little less emotionally developed is to just try and demonstrate how to do it. Be a peer, be someone who's like a mature adult dealing with your grandchild, and be like, I'm not going to let this toddler control me with their emotional reactions. I'll become a gray rock. And whether it's accepting their pejoratives or calling yourself worse names or saying, well, congratulations, you are related to, or somebody who you think is bigoted in some way, but always drill down on the label and really get them to back it up, because otherwise it's just a lazy way to dismiss and shut down conversation.
Yeah, I think the curiosity path is a good way to do that. Or like Columbo, who was curious, and a little bit paced as far as, getting certain pieces of information out on the desk that they don't necessarily understand are going to connect in the larger conversation. You don't think conspiracies exist. That's interesting. What's your positions on Machiavelli? Have you ever read The Prince? How about his Art of War? There's entire sections in those books about the power of conspiracy and how it moves politics. So am I misunderstanding the history of how things work? Like, what did you read that supersedes this? And then you're going to find out they don't even know who Machiavelli is or was. And they don't read books. And you probably shouldn't be having an extended conversation with them unless they're paying you to tutor them on how the world works. And you should move on with your day and keep working toward your goals, because that other person clearly is incapacitated. And unless you're in the market of replenishing consciousness to people and somehow get rewarded, I suggest you keep on pace with what you're trying to do with your life and leave them to Jesus. But everybody deserves a chance.
That's some rhetorical gold right there. Like, listen, if you want to pay me, I can tutor you about such things. That's hilarious.
Yeah, I mean, I spent tens of thousands of hours re-educating myself after I discovered I was indoctrinated. So what I have between my ears is much more reflective of reality than what most people can accumulate over an entire lifetime, because they've never purposefully looked with the intent to understand the history and evolution of these institutions. And so that's what, for instance, this show brings to the table that other people can't muster, because it took too many decades to figure this out, to show up, to analyze the news in the first place. We have Autonomy season 13 coming up in a couple weeks. And if you are living your dream, thriving at your job, your family's all squared away, everything's going good, you would still benefit from Autonomy. You could have a lot of fun, and that would be a nice, relaxing way to get this type of knowledge. Most people, they got too much to do. They don't have any time. They don't have enough money, and they're the ones who need the skills the most, because the first scenario is a case where people are using these skills. They learn to make an offer more times to bring in more money than what they need. It greatly reduces the stress and fear and unknowns and ambiguity. Like, money doesn't fix everything. But if you don't know how to make your offer and go get more money than you need, your cortisol, your adrenal system, everything's stressed out from fear, and the unknown. This is the one area where you could start to mitigate that, because learning some methods and applying those methods and learning how to show up for yourself and all the other things that they could have taught us in an education, but we didn't get in the school indoctrination, we need to backfill. And we need to probably backfill quicker, sooner than later, because there's a huge opportunity cost to waiting years to get these skills between your ears. Now, 12 weeks a year, we get together, we have people from all over the world who are interested in either returning to the course and continuing to grow. So there's a whole bunch of graduates that go through every season, or new people who have just found out about Autonomy and the fact that, they might not even recognize the root causes. They just have a bunch of symptoms. Those symptoms are learned helplessness, extended adolescence, scarcity mentality, and not enough money in your bank account to start with. And those are all things that you can learn to control and control the levels of. And as you turn down your scarcity and your fear and you make room for creativity and opportunity and building your skills, your income and your offer to the market go up, because your utility, your usefulness of what you can do for others becomes higher value. Okay? So the people who say, I can't afford Autonomy, you are the ones I created it for, and you're the ones who need it so you don't have that problem for the rest of your life. Okay? If I would have depended on my college education, I would have found that a cruel and unusual experience. And that's what a lot of people were stuck to. Luckily, I had enough foresight to see opportunity, to have enough courage to invest in myself, enough creativity to borrow the money, to buy into the franchise, where I learned some of the techniques and tactics and methods and strategies and principles I teach in Autonomy. But that's not where all the material comes from. It's just where my initial success came from, in a 200x return on my investment from making a $5,000 investment into my education while I was in school, trying to pay for school. I learned how to run my own business, which by the time I went into the job world, into the corporate world, that's a super high value skill, knowing how to solve problems for big companies, and they pay you well for that. And I was so good at it that I found some flaws in their system and tried to bring it up and became a whistleblower. And it's at that point when these skills really saved my life. Because if I didn't have those skills, I would have had to compromise my integrity. I probably would have had to turn my head and cough, because I don't know how else to get money in this market. So I'm going to have to do some things that are a little shady. Luckily, I had the courage and bravery because I had the competence and confidence. I know how to go walk on my own. I don't need to compromise my integrity to keep my job. Unfortunately, a lot of people, all they do is know how to compromise their own and other people's integrity to submarine the person next to them to give them a better chance at surviving. It's a very Darwinian way of looking at it. It's a survival of the fittest. It's very ruthless and cutthroat and sharks, swimming with sharks type of thing. And you can do better than that. You don't need that. But that's where most people find like their default, because they don't add skills on their own beyond what's easily offered at school and university. So if you are interested in making yourself more of who you can be and igniting your potential and directing it toward your goals and mapping your dreams into reality, then all you need to do is go to getautonomy.info, watch the videos on the page, go through the primer course, get your questions answered, talk to a graduate, and only then can you find out about options, because it's not for everybody. And the people who are excelling in the course are the people who make it through that process without making excuses for themselves, without quitting on themselves. Because if you can't do those two things, you're not ready to invest in yourself. You'll just disappoint yourself again. When you're ready to stop disappointing yourself and get your move on and up your mojo, then you go to getautonomy.info, and classes start in just a couple weeks. So
Opportunities knocking. Carpe diem.